we go. Hey folks, how's it going? Mike from LI Flies Mike here. And today I wanted to make a video on some basic wet fly swinning techniques or some grease line fishing techniques. And this is also going to cover essentially how to approach working an area with some current. It's important to be able to fish in different ways throughout the season, and just casting and stripping a fly isn't always going to be the best way of presenting a fly to a striped bass working in current. So real quick, we'll go over some of the different equipment that you'll use when wet fly swinning or grease line fishing, and some of the lines and flies, and then we'll get into the techniques. So when it comes to fly rods, you can use your standard 9-foot fly rod, but in the past I used a Kenny Abrams fly rod, which is about 10.5 feet. Now it's important that you have a rod that is a little bit longer because it allows you to lift the line up and mend the line. And speaking of lines, we generally use floating lines when it comes to wet fly swinning or grease line fishing, particularly grease line fishing, but you can wet fly swing with intermediate lines. So now, what flies to swing? Generally, we want to fish flies that have the most movement possible. Traditionally, the Rays fly by Ray Bondrew or the Abrams eel punt here by Kenny Abrams were very sparse flies designed to be fished in a way where they have a ton of movement even without stripping, but they also accurately represent what the baitfish looks like when it's translucent and in the water. But you can also swing larger flies like squimpish hollows, for instance, bucktail hollows, beast flies. The idea is you want to use materials that have the most amount of movement in them as possible. With these particular types of fishing techniques, you're not always going to be stripping the fly or imparting action into the fly. You want the fly to be able to breathe underwater and move and undulate and pulsate to give you that lifelike realism to the fly, right? And this is one of the reasons why fly fishing so well, because you can't really do that with things like plugs. So when it comes to working a particular area, generally let's say there's just a stretch of beach that has current flowing from right to left. I'll start off from wherever I walk in, and then I'll slowly work down current. And all I'm going to do is follow the current down, and about every 5 or 10 feet, essentially fan cast and slowly increasing the length of my casts as I work this particular area, and then I'll move about 5 or 10 feet to the left and just do it all over again. And that's the basic, I guess, blind casting, searching technique that we do for general striped bass fishing. And generally when we're just fishing for striped bass, we'll just use a stripping technique, whether it's single hand stripping, two hand like the modern two hand technique that you see here, either imparting some pauses or working it fast, slow. You get the idea. It's our general way that we fish for striped bass. And it's important as you're working your way down, fan cast, you want to cover the area is the idea. And you can use the current. We're essentially doing a semi-swing here just by stripping it, but it's important that we're covering the area, right? This is our general striped bass fishing. And when I refer to fan casting, I mean casting from left to right, and think of like a clock. Use the hands of a clock, 10 to 2. But what about when you want to be able to present the fly in a way that is a little bit more natural? Bait fish aren't always zooming across the current, against the current at weird angles, like how a lot of times our fly will be presented when there's current. So this is where wet fly swinging and grease line fishing come into play. So for the wet fly swing, essentially what we're doing is like if we were fishing for trout on a river. We're essentially just casting down current to a certain degree. You can either cast slightly down, or you can cast at like a 45-degree angle. And then we're allowing the floating line to be dragged by the current. And it's going to drag our fly and simulating as if it was a bait fish being swept across this current. So the whole idea is you're going to cast essentially downstream, and then your fly will start getting dragged and your line will start coming tight. And as this happens, you can just kind of slightly follow the line. You still want to keep tension on it. The whole idea is you want to keep tension on the fly. And then as your line starts swinging out and straightening over time, it'll start hanging in the current. You want to let it hang there for a bit, because a lot of times fish can follow it and they'll sit there and kind of contemplate, I guess, whether or not they're going to eat it. I've had it happen many times. And now you can see here from Stripers and Streamers by Ray Bondrew, there's a great explanation of essentially just like what we were talking about, like fan casting, we're searching an area. And by slowly increasing the length of our casts, as we're wet fly swinging, we can cover quite a large area in front of us just by swinging the fly. So what you do is you start out, let's say with 10 feet, 15 feet, You cast downstream or down current here, because we're fishing in the bay, and your fly is just going to swing out and then essentially almost parallel with you. Then after bringing the fly in, you strip out another 5 or 10 feet of line, and you slowly just keep doing that until you run out of line or you reach your casting limit, or essentially where you think the fish are going to be. Don't forget, we're also trying to, while we're blind casting here and almost blind fly swinging, there's mussel beds in front of me, there's a rip, so I have a general idea where the fish are going to be within probably about 30 to 70 or 80 feet out in front of me. So this is a great way. We're just going to slowly move down and swing our fly and cover a bunch of ground. Let's say there's any uneven drag close up. You see me lifting the rod at times. That's to ensure that the fly line is swinging evenly. Now, grease line fishing. This is a technique that comes from salmon fishing. Jock Scott has a great book on this, and Kenny Abrams talks about it, where they used to put grease on the line so it would float higher. But essentially what we're doing is we're casting perpendicular out, right? Ideally, if your fly line was sitting perfectly straight out the whole time, the fly would be swimming sideways or parallel to the fish looking at it. So what we do is, by just mending the line before the line comes tight after casting out, we're essentially able to have the fly swim completely sideways. So when the fish sees the fly, it's not going to see it at an angle. It's going to see that perfect side profile of the fly. So what you do is, you don't want the line to come tight. You just keep mending out, keep mending out. Now you can stop mending at any point and start swinging, because what's going to happen here is, once your line starts coming tight, we're essentially in a wet fly swing, right? That's essentially what we're doing. So what you can do is, you can, just like we did before, you can cast out a little bit, mend for 5-10 feet, then let it come tight. You can cast out the same distance and then mend for 20 feet. And vice versa. Keep doing that and keep mending so your line is grease line fishing at that particular distance that you've casted out. And then you can start increasing the distance that you cast out and then start mending. And then, of course, once your line starts coming tight, we're essentially in a wet fly swing at that point. The other option is, what you see me do here is, you can cast and then essentially just keep mending until you get to your backing. You can grease line fish, 80 or 100 feet at times and get a perfect parallel drift. So this is a very popular salmon technique, and you should try it out for stripers. One thing you want to do is watch your fly line, the tip of it, because a lot of times that will be the indicator if a fish is on or not, because your line is not tight. Now, a combination of both, this is how I generally fish a lot, is a combination of wet fly swinging and then some general stripping techniques. So what I'm doing here is, I'm casting out, and a lot of times I'll mend it a little bit just so there's slack on the fly lines and the fly can sink a little bit. So it'll sink, it'll rise, it'll sink, it'll rise when I'm mending it. And then what I'll do is, after the fly sinks a little bit, I'll strip it a couple times and then let it stop and start swinging again. So it's essentially just mixing some of the different techniques that we have covered in this video. And we're allowing the fly to swim in different areas of the water column with the floating line, but we're also, at times it's moving and erratically, and then it's slowing down, being swept with the current. So this is, a lot of times I like to mix the two together, and you'll see here we get a fish. There we go. Okay. Damn. Might be a nice fish. Putting a bend in the switch. Maybe not that big, but not that big. Landing this fish. It's been a while since I've landed a fish. I mean, it's actually pretty decent size. Gotta get them out of the current. Come this way. Nice fish. Nice fish. Let's see. A little bit past there. See ya. Holy hell, he actually bent the hook. Oh my god, he bent this hook. Look at that. Wow. He actually bent the hook. Look at that. Okay. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this basic introduction to wet fly swinning and grease line fishing for striped bass. We'll be covering some more different stripping techniques, casting techniques, how to scout out different areas and look at structure, things like that in the future. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. I wanted to take that footage of me going fishing that day and kind of just show how I approach fishing a particular area and break down some different ways to fish flies for striped bass. Well, my name is Mike from LI Flies Mike. We have new fly tying and fly fishing videos coming out every week, as well as live fly tying on Fridays and early access for members. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck out there this season. Until the next one, tight lines.